3 moves, that's all it took to silence an entire boardroom full of millionaires. 3 moves to turn a smirk into shock. 3 moves to prove that the person everyone had been looking down on for months was the one person in that building they should have been looking up to. But before we get to that moment, the moment when Marcus Webb made a move that would change his life forever, we need to understand how a chess grandmaster ended up pushing a mop in a corporate tower. And how a CEO with an ego the size of Manhattan learned the most expensive lesson of her life. This is a story about assumptions, about dignity, and about the price of underestimating someone based on the color of their uniform or their skin. Marcus Webb woke up every morning at 4:47 a.m., not 4:45, not 4:50, exactly 4:47. He'd learned long ago that those extra 2 minutes made all the difference between rushing and moving with purpose. And Marcus Webb was a man who did everything with purpose. He was 53 years old, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair and deep lines around his eyes that came from years of intense concentration. His hands were strong and calloused now, worn rough by the wooden handles of mops and the harsh chemicals he worked with 6 nights a week. But if you looked closely, really looked, you'd notice something unusual about those hands, the way his fingers moved, deliberate, thoughtful. Like they were always 3 steps ahead of wherever they currently rested. Every morning, Marcus would make himself a simple breakfast: 2 eggs scrambled, 1 piece of toast, black coffee. While he ate, he'd sit at the small table in his studio apartment in Queens, and he'd study the chess board that sat there. Always a board, always a game in progress, sometimes against himself. Sometimes recreating famous matches from memory. The board was worn, the pieces mismatched, some plastic, some wood, collected over years. On the wall above that table hung a single photograph. Faded now, the colors washed out by time. It showed a younger Marcus, maybe 25 years old, lean and confident, standing in front of a banner that read U.S. Chess Championship. He was shaking hands with someone, accepting a trophy. His eyes in that photograph sparkled with the future, with possibility, with the absolute certainty that life was going to unfold exactly as planned. The Marcus who looked at that photograph now knew better. He'd leave his apartment at 5:30 a.m., take the 7 train to Grand Central, then transfer to get to Midtown by 6:15. The Hartwell Industries building didn't need cleaning until after business hours, but Marcus had learned that showing up early, being visible, being the reliable one, that's what kept you employed when you were starting over at 53 years old with a 10-year gap in your resume. The other janitors liked Marcus. He was quiet but kind. He'd help without being asked. When Ramon's back went out, Marcus covered his floors for 3 weeks without complaint. When Sonia's daughter needed help with math homework, Marcus stayed after his shift to tutor her. He never talked about himself, never mentioned where he'd come from or what he'd done before. But sometimes, late at night, when the offices were empty and Marcus pushed his cart through the silent hallways, he'd pause by the executive floor's library. They had a chess set there. An expensive one, carved marble pieces on a mahogany board, decorative, probably never used. Marcus would stand there just for a moment and his fingers would twitch, remembering, calculating, seeing variations and possibilities that existed in a world he no longer belonged to. He had a daughter, 16 years old. She lived with her mother in Chicago. Marcus saw her twice a year if he was lucky, spoke to her every Sunday night at 8 p.m. without fail. He was working to save money, to rebuild, to somehow find a way back to being the father, the man he'd been before everything fell apart, before the mistake that cost him everything. Hartwell Industries occupied floors 32 through 45 of a glass and steel tower in Midtown Manhattan. The company dealt in private equity and venture capital, rich people making richer people richer, in Marcus's assessment. The employees dressed in clothes that cost more than his monthly rent. They threw away lunches that could have fed his entire building, but Marcus didn't judge. Judgment was a luxury he couldn't afford. He just cleaned their offices, emptied their trash, and tried not to think about how a decade earlier he'd been on the other side of that divide. Not their wealth level, perhaps, but respected. Recognized, someone whose mind was valued, not just their labor. The cleaning crew started their shifts at 6 p.m. after most employees had left. There were 8 of them. Ramon, Sonia, Chen, Dimitri, Patricia, Aisha, Marcus, and their supervisor, Wayne, who'd been doing this for 30 years and treated his team with gruff fairness. Wayne had given Marcus a chance when no one else would. Marcus never forgot that. The 38th floor, executive territory, was Marcus's primary responsibility. Corner offices with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Conference rooms with tables that could seat 20. A marble-floored reception area with modern art that Marcus suspected was expensive because it was incomprehensible. And that library, the one with the chess set. Most executives ignored the cleaning crew entirely. They'd stay late working, earbuds in, eyes on screens, not even acknowledging when Marcus emptied their wastebaskets. Some offered polite nods. A few actually said thank you. Marcus appreciated those few, but there was one executive who was different. Victoria Hartwell, 38 years old, CEO, granddaughter of the company's founder. She'd taken over the company 3 years ago when her father retired, and according to the office gossip that Marcus overheard while cleaning. She was ruthlessly competent and utterly convinced of her own brilliance. Marcus had seen her dozens of times over the 6 months he'd worked there. She was always the last to leave, often still in the building at 10 or 11 p.m., heels clicking down empty hallways, phone pressed to her ear, making deals that probably moved millions of dollars. She'd never once looked at him, not really looked. Her eyes would pass over him the same way they'd pass over a piece of furniture, functional, forgettable, beneath notice. Marcus didn't take it personally. He understood the invisible barrier between people like Victoria Hartwell and people like him, the janitor in the blue uniform, the hired help. The person whose name she'd never thought to learn. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know yet, was that Victoria Hartwell was about to make him visible. Very visible. In a way that would change both their lives forever. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything started. Marcus was cleaning the executive conference room on the 38th floor around 8:30 p.m. He'd finished vacuuming and was wiping down the massive mahogany table when he heard voices approaching. Victoria Hartwell swept in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. Marcus immediately moved to leave. He knew the protocol, make yourself scarce when executives need the space. But Victoria barely glanced at him as she spoke. "You can finish." "We're just grabbing some documents." Marcus nodded and continued his work, trying to be unobtrusive. He was cleaning the far end of the table when he heard one of the men laugh. "Victoria, you're insane. Nobody can be that confident in their chess game." Marcus's hands stilled for just a fraction of a second. Chess. "I'm not confident," Victoria replied, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who knew she was brilliant and was tired of pretending otherwise. "I'm realistic. I've been playing since I was 4 years old, private coaches, competed nationally in college. I've studied more chess theory than most people have studied anything." "So the standing bet still holds?" the second man asked, amused. "Beat you in a game, win a date," Victoria laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. "The bet is far more than a date, Marcus. Beat me in chess and I'll marry you right there, Vegas, the works, that's how certain I am." The first man whistled low. "That's quite a bet." "It's a safe bet," Victoria said, walking toward the library alcove where the marble chess set sat. Marcus watched her from the corner of his eye as she ran her finger along the board. "I've played thousands of games, studied every Grandmaster, Kasparov, Fischer, Carlsen, Tal. I can think 12 moves ahead, 15 on a good day." She turned back to her companions, and for the first time her eyes landed properly on Marcus. Not seeing him as a person, just registering his presence as a thing to be addressed. "You play chess?" she asked suddenly. Marcus hesitated. The question seemed to come from nowhere. He could feel the weight of the moment, the way the universe sometimes narrows down to a single decision point. He could say no, should say no, stay invisible. "A little," Marcus said quietly. "Long time ago." "Beat me," Victoria said, and there was something cruel in her smile, "and you can marry me too." "Hell, you'd probably be doing better for yourself than most of the men I meet at charity galas." The 2 men laughed. It was clear Victoria was joking, or not quite joking, performing. Showing off her wit and confidence for her colleagues, using Marcus as a prop in her display of superiority. "I appreciate the offer, ma'am," Marcus said carefully, his voice neutral, "but I should finish my work." That's what I thought, Victoria said, already losing interest, turning back to the men. Chess is about intelligence, strategy, discipline. You can't just pick up the game, you need years of study, natural talent, the right training. She said it casually, not with malice, but with absolute certainty, with the assumption that someone like Marcus, someone pushing a mop, couldn't possibly understand the complexity of something like chess. Marcus said nothing. He finished wiping the table, gathered his supplies, and left the room. But something had shifted. A door had been opened that couldn't be easily closed. Victoria Hartwell had no idea that the man she'd just dismissed had once played simultaneous exhibitions against 20 opponents at once, winning 18 of the matches. Had no idea that he'd been invited to compete in the U.S. Chess Championship 4 times. Had no idea that the little chess he'd played long ago had earned him the title of National Master. She had no idea that she'd just underestimated the most dangerous opponent she'd ever face. And if Marcus had walked away right then, if he'd let it go, this story might have ended differently. But later that night, as he was finishing up on the 38th floor, Marcus found himself standing in front of that marble chess set. His fingers reached out almost involuntarily and moved a white pawn forward 2 spaces. E4, king's pawn opening, the most common first move in chess. Then he moved a black pawn to meet it. E5. Classical response. He stood there for a long moment, his mind already seeing the game unfold. 40 moves deep, 60 moves. Seeing patterns and possibilities, and the beautiful, terrible complexity of 64 squares and 32 pieces. What happened next, nobody expected. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria Hartwell's chess challenge became office legend. She didn't just mention it once, she brought it up constantly. It became her signature move at business dinners and board meetings, her party trick, her way of demonstrating intellectual dominance. "Beat me in chess and I'll marry you," she'd announce, laughing. "That's how confident I am. 6 years, nobody's gotten close." Marcus heard about it constantly. The other janitors would joke about it during their dinner breaks. "You should take her up on it," Ramon said one night, gesturing with his sandwich. "Maybe she'll pay you to go away after you lose." "Rich people do crazy things. Marcus doesn't play chess," Sonia said. "I used to," Marcus said quietly. "Little bit." "Well, don't go getting any ideas," Wayne warned. "Last thing we need is you getting fired for bothering the executives. These people don't like mixing with the help, you understand?" Marcus understood. He understood very well. He'd been on both sides of that divide, and he knew that crossing it uninvited usually ended badly for the person with less power. But something about Victoria's assumption, her absolute certainty that no one could challenge her, that intelligence and strategy belonged exclusively to people in corner offices, it bothered him. Not because it was personal, but because it was so casually cruel, so thoughtlessly dismissive of the possibility that people's circumstances might not reflect their capabilities. The 3rd week, Marcus saw Victoria actually play chess. It was a Thursday night, around 9 p.m. He was cleaning the offices nearby when he heard voices in the library. Through the glass walls, he could see Victoria sitting at the marble chess set across from a younger man, an associate from the looks of his outfit. Marcus shouldn't have watched, should have moved on. But he found himself pausing, his hands still on the vacuum cleaner, eyes tracking the board. The young associate opened with E4. Victoria responded with the Sicilian defense, C5. Aggressive. Unbalanced, the kind of opening that led to complex middle games where superior tactics prevailed. Marcus watched Victoria dismantle her opponent in 23 moves. She was good, very good. Her piece coordination was excellent. She controlled the center, developed her minor pieces efficiently, and recognized a tactical opportunity to win a pawn on move 17 that collapsed the young man's entire position. When it was over, Victoria was gracious in victory. "You played well," she told him. "Better than most, but you left your queen undefended on move 16. Always protect your queen." The young man left, embarrassed. Victoria reset the pieces, studying the board, clearly analyzing the game in her mind, finding better moves, deeper variations. That's when she noticed Marcus, standing there watching. "Something interesting?" Victoria asked. There was an edge to her voice, not quite hostile but defensive. Like she'd been caught in a private moment. "You play well, ma'am," Marcus said simply. "You understand what you were watching?" She seemed genuinely curious, as if the idea of a janitor following a chess game was mildly surprising. Some, Marcus said. The Sicilian defense. You played it aggressively. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. You know chess notation? Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Interesting, Victoria said, but her tone made clear she didn't find it that interesting. Well, if you think you can do better than my associate, you're welcome to try. The standing offer applies to everyone. She said it carelessly, mockingly, the way you dare a child to try something you know they can't accomplish. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not anger, he'd learned to set anger aside years ago, but something else. A recognition of a moment that mattered, a door opening. Maybe someday, Marcus said quietly. Victoria smiled. Sure. Someday, when pigs fly and janitors become grandmasters. She walked away, heels clicking. She'd already forgotten the conversation, but Marcus hadn't, and he wouldn't. The weekend after that encounter, Marcus went to the public library near his apartment. He hadn't been there in months, hadn't let himself go, actually. Too many memories, but now he needed to. The chess section was on the second floor, tucked in a corner. Marcus ran his fingers along the spines of familiar books. My System by Nimzowitsch. The Complete Chess Strategy by Ludek Patchman. Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess. He'd owned all of these once, sold them when he needed money, when everything fell apart. He pulled out a book on advanced tactics and sat at one of the library tables. Within minutes, the last decade fell away. His mind slipped back into the patterns, the rhythms, the beautiful logic of chess. He worked through problems, mate in 3, mate in 4, find the winning continuation. His hands moved across the small demonstration board the library provided, pieces clicking softly. Excuse me, a voice said. An elderly man with thick glasses stood there. You're working through Tal's combinations? Marcus nodded. Mikhail Tal, the magician from Riga. One of the most brilliant attacking players in chess history. I haven't seen anyone study those in years, the old man said. You play competitively? Used to, Marcus said. Long time ago. You ever play here? We have a club, meet Sunday afternoons. Marcus smiled but shook his head. I work weekends. But thank you. The old man nodded and moved away, but something about the encounter reminded Marcus of who he used to be, when he was part of the chess community, when people knew his name. When he walked into tournament halls and felt that electric anticipation of intellectual combat. He'd given all that up, had to give it up, after the mistake. After the scandal that destroyed his career as a chess coach, even though he'd been innocent, even though the accusation had been proven false eventually. By the time the truth came out, his reputation was ruined, his students gone, his income vanished. His wife left. His daughter learned to be ashamed of him. Chess had once been everything. Then it became a reminder of everything he'd lost. But sitting in that library, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. The old hunger. The desire not just to play, but to prove something. To himself, maybe, or to the world that had decided he no longer mattered. Monday night, Marcus returned to work with quiet determination. He didn't have a plan exactly. Didn't know what he was going to do, but he was done being invisible. Around 8:30 p.m., he was cleaning near the executive library when he saw Victoria there again, playing against another opponent. Another young executive, another victim. Marcus watched through the glass. This time, Victoria played the king's Indian defense as black, hyper-modern, strategic. She built up a massive pawn center for white, then systematically destroyed it with a pawn break on the king side. Brilliant, textbook execution. When her opponent resigned, Victoria looked up and saw Marcus watching again. This time, something in his posture must have been different. Because Victoria stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. You've been watching me play, she said, not a question, an observation. Yes, ma'am, and you think you could do better? Marcus met her eyes. I think I could give you a game. Victoria studied him for a long moment, really looked at him for the first time. Trying to figure out if he was serious or delusional. What's your name? She asked. Marcus Webb. Well, Marcus Webb, I have a dinner in 20 minutes. But if you're here tomorrow night, same time, I'll give you your shot. She paused. Fair warning, I don't go easy on people. And when I beat you, and I will beat you, I don't want any complaints about humiliation or hurt feelings. We clear? We're clear, Marcus said. Good. Victoria turned to leave, then stopped. Out of curiosity, where did you learn chess? Marcus could have told her the truth right then. Could have said, I was a national master. I've beaten international masters. I've taught chess for 20 years. I've forgotten more about this game than you've learned. But he didn't. Here and there, Marcus said. Over the years. Victoria nodded, satisfied. She'd already decided this would be a quick, forgettable game against someone who didn't understand how outmatched he was. She had no idea she was about to face the challenge of her life. And Marcus. Marcus went home that night and didn't sleep. He sat at his small table at his worn board and played through every game he could remember, every opening, every variation. He thought about Victoria's style, aggressive but sound, tactical but not reckless, well-studied but perhaps overconfident. He thought about which opening would surprise her, challenge her, expose the gaps in her preparation. And slowly, piece by piece, move by move, a plan formed in his mind. If only Victoria had asked more questions. If only she'd wondered how a janitor knew chess notation. If only she'd considered the possibility that circumstances don't always reflect capability. But she didn't ask. And that was her first mistake. The news of the chess match spread through the Hartwell Industries building like wildfire. By Tuesday afternoon, everyone knew. The janitor was going to play the CEO. The help was challenging the boss. It was scandalous, hilarious, absurd. Marcus heard the talk everywhere. Did you hear about Marcus? He actually took Victoria up on her bet. That's career suicide. She's going to humiliate him. I heard he thinks he's good, like actually good. Please. She's going to crush him in 10 moves. Some of the other janitors looked at Marcus with concern. You sure about this? Ramon asked during their dinner break. Victoria Hartwell doesn't seem like the forgiving type. You embarrass her or even just waste her time, she could make your life difficult. I'll be respectful, Marcus said. It's just a game. But it wasn't just a game. Everyone could feel it. There was something electric about this moment. The successful CEO with her public challenge, the quiet janitor accepting. The implicit class warfare. The racial dynamics that nobody wanted to talk about directly, but everyone was thinking about. The white woman executive versus the black man who cleaned her office. By 8 p.m. Tuesday, a crowd had gathered. Not a huge crowd, maybe 15 people. Young associates who'd stayed late to watch. A few curious employees from other departments who'd heard the gossip. Even a couple of Marcus's fellow janitors who'd finished their shifts early to support him. Victoria arrived at 8:15, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus earned in 2 months. She looked mildly surprised by the audience. I didn't realize this was going to be a spectator sport, she said. Word got around, one of the young associates said, grinning. This is the most exciting thing to happen in this office all year. Victoria's expression hardened slightly. She didn't like being part of a show. But she'd made this bet public, made it part of her brand, so she couldn't back out now. Marcus arrived in his janitor's uniform. Blue pants, blue shirt, his name embroidered on the pocket. He looked calm, too calm perhaps, like someone who'd made peace with whatever was about to happen. Marcus, Victoria said, gesturing to the marble chess set. You're white. First move is yours. They sat down across from each other. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, some already recording video. This was social media gold. Either the CEO would crush the janitor and reaffirm the social hierarchy, or, impossibly, absurdly, something shocking would happen. Marcus reached out and moved his king's pawn forward 2 spaces. E4. Victoria responded instantly. E5, accepting the challenge, the classical game. Marcus's next move came quickly. Knight to F3, developing, standard, nothing fancy yet. Victoria paused. She'd expected the Italian game or the Spanish opening. Standard continuations. But Marcus had played something called the King's Knight opening, leaving multiple possibilities open. Interesting. Maybe he'd studied more than she thought. She developed her knight, NC6. Marcus played bishop to C4. Now they were in the Italian game, comfortable territory for both players. The crowd watched in silence. Those who knew chess could already tell this wasn't going to be a 10-move slaughter. Marcus was playing competently, not brilliantly yet, but competently. His moves were sound, purposeful. 10 moves in, Victoria's expression changed, slight furrow in her brow. Marcus had just played a pawn sacrifice, giving up material, that opened up his position in ways she hadn't anticipated. It was the kind of move that looked reckless but was actually deeply calculated. She studied the board for 3 full minutes before making her next move. The crowd shifted restlessly. "You've done this before," Victoria said quietly. It wasn't a question anymore. "Yes, ma'am, more than just here and there." Marcus didn't respond. He was studying the position, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table, eyes moving across the board in that particular way that chess players have, seeing not the pieces as they were, but as they could be 5 moves from now. Victoria captured the pawn he'd sacrificed. It seemed like the obvious move, the winning move. Marcus smiled slightly. It was the first real emotion he'd shown since sitting down. He moved his queen to e2, attacking, threatening. Suddenly, Victoria's king looked exposed. Her pieces were uncoordinated. The pawn she'd captured had been bait, and she'd taken it. "Oh, she's in trouble," someone in the crowd whispered. Victoria saw it too. She'd walked into a trap. Not a devastating one, she could fight her way out, but she was no longer dictating the game. Marcus was. She spent 7 minutes on her next move. When she played it, castling queenside, Marcus nodded slightly. It was the best defensive try. It bought her time, but Marcus was relentless. Not aggressive in the chaotic sense, but applying pressure, methodical, patient, like water wearing down stone. He improved his pieces one by one, coordinating them, building threats that Victoria had to respond to. By move 25, Victoria's position was difficult, not losing yet but uncomfortable. She was having to defend, having to react, and every time she dealt with one threat, Marcus created another. The crowd was completely silent now. Even people who didn't play chess could feel the shift in the room. The power dynamic inverting. The presumed victor struggling while the presumed victim remained calm, controlled, in command. On move 32, Victoria made a small mistake. She pushed a pawn forward 1 square when she should have kept it back. A subtle error. The kind that wouldn't matter against a weaker player. But Marcus wasn't a weaker player. 3 moves later, he forced a queen trade. Victoria had no choice but to accept. And without queens on the board in the endgame, Marcus's superior pawn structure became dominant. "I resign," Victoria said quietly. The room erupted. Not in cheers, nobody quite knew how to react. But in shocked exclamations, gasps, nervous laughter, someone whispered, "Holy shit!" Victoria stood up quickly. Her face was composed, but there was color high on her cheeks. Embarrassment, anger. Confusion. "That was well played," she said stiffly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I had good teachers," Marcus said. "Did you compete? Tournament play?" Marcus hesitated. This was the moment. He could tell the truth, reveal everything, but something held him back, maybe pride. Maybe the desire to see if Victoria would learn respect without needing him to produce credentials. Maybe the understanding that sometimes people need to sit with their assumptions before they can truly change. He said simply. Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't like being given partial information, didn't like the feeling that Marcus knew something she didn't. "Best 2 out of 3, she said suddenly. "That game could have been a fluke. You play well, but I wasn't at my best. Tomorrow night, same time, we'll see if you can do it again." The crowd murmured. This was getting interesting. Marcus could have said no, should have said no. He'd proven his point. Won the bet, technically, if anyone was taking it seriously. But he recognized what was happening. Victoria wasn't going to accept defeat gracefully. Wasn't going to learn the lesson. She was going to rationalize, excuse, and demand a rematch until she won or until she'd satisfied herself that Marcus's victory was legitimate. "Okay," Marcus said. "Tomorrow night." Victoria walked away without another word. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with excitement, already texting friends, posting about what they'd witnessed. Ramon clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Brother, I don't know where you learned to play like that, but that was beautiful, absolutely beautiful." Marcus smiled tiredly. But inside, he felt something unfamiliar. Not quite triumph, but recognition, visibility. For the first time in a decade, someone had seen his mind work, had been forced to respect what he could do. It should have felt better than it did, because Marcus knew something the crowd didn't know, something Victoria didn't know. That game had only been the beginning. Wednesday night arrived with even more spectators. The word had spread beyond the office. People from other companies in the building came up to watch. Someone had posted a video of Tuesday's game on social media, and it was starting to go viral. Not huge yet, but getting attention. The hashtag #Janitor vs CEO was trending locally. Victoria arrived looking determined. She'd prepared. Marcus could tell from the way she carried herself, the chess book tucked under her arm. She'd spent the day studying, analyzing their previous game, looking for Marcus's weaknesses. "Ready?" she asked when Marcus arrived. "Yes, ma'am." They sat. This time, Victoria played white. She opened with d4, the queen's pawn game, more positional, less tactical, playing to her strengths. Marcus responded with the king's Indian defense, hyper-modern, strategic. The same opening Victoria had used when Marcus first watched her play. She noticed. Her eyes flickered with recognition and something else, respect, annoyance, both. This game was different from the first. Slower, more strategic. Both players maneuvering carefully, building their positions, avoiding the sharp tactical skirmishes of the previous match. It was like watching two grandmasters, though nobody in the room except Marcus actually was one. The crowd grew as the game progressed. By move 20, there were at least 30 people watching. Someone had set up a demonstration board to show the position to people who couldn't see the actual game. Others were following along on chess apps, looking at computer evaluations of the position. "The computer says it's dead even," someone whispered. "Exactly equal." Victoria heard it. Her expression tightened. She'd expected to have an advantage by now, expected her preparation to pay off. But Marcus was matching her move for move. Every plan she tried, he had an answer for. Every subtle trap she set, he avoided. It was like playing against a mirror, someone who understood the game at exactly her level. No, someone who understood it better. On move 38, Marcus sacrificed his bishop. It looked insane. Suicidal, giving up a piece for just 2 pawns, Victoria's eyes lit up. She'd seen this type of sacrifice before in her studies. It usually didn't work. The piece was worth more than 2 pawns. She took the bishop. 5 moves later, she realized her mistake. Those 2 pawns were monstrous. They'd become 3 pawns marching down the board toward promotion. Marcus's remaining pieces coordinated perfectly to support them. Victoria's extra bishop was suddenly useless, stuck defending against the pawn storm. "I don't believe this," someone in the crowd muttered. Victoria fought hard. She played the best defensive moves possible. But slowly, inexorably, Marcus pushed forward. The pawns advanced. Her position collapsed. On move 56, Victoria tipped her king over. "I resign," she said. Her voice was steady, but barely. This time, the crowd did cheer. Not mockingly, but with genuine appreciation for the chess they'd witnessed. It had been a brilliant game, a masterpiece. Victoria stood quickly. Her face was pale. "You're not just some casual player," she said. "Who are you, really?" Marcus stood as well. He looked at her for a long moment. He could see the calculation in her eyes. She was someone who needed to understand things, to categorize them, to know where she stood. "I'm Marcus Webb," he said quietly. "I'm a janitor. And I play chess." "That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting right now." Victoria's eyes flashed. She wasn't used to being denied information. "Fine, one more game, Friday night. But this time we do it properly. Tournament conditions, chess clock, recorded notation, and if you win..." She paused, and Marcus could see her wrestling with her pride. "If you win, I'll make a donation to any charity you choose. $10,000. The crowd gasped. This was no longer just about ego. Victoria was putting real stakes on the table. "And if you win?" Marcus asked. "If I win, you tell me who you really are, your chess background, everything." Marcus considered this. Part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away. He'd proven his point twice over. But another part, the part that had spent 10 years invisible, dismissed, underestimated, wanted one more game. One more chance to show what he could do. "Okay," Marcus said. "Friday night." The next 2 days were chaos at Hartwell Industries. The videos from the matches were spreading on social media. Chess websites were picking up the story. "CEO loses to company janitor in viral chess match," read the headlines. Chess streamers were analyzing the games. "This janitor plays at international master strength," one titled their video. Victoria was silent about it publicly, but privately Marcus heard. She was furious. Not just about losing, but about being unable to figure out who Marcus was. She'd had her assistant search for Marcus Webb in chess databases, but found nothing recent. She didn't know to look back 15 years to a different life, to a name that had once meant something in the chess world. Marcus spent Thursday night at home, not studying chess. Just sitting with his thoughts, he called his daughter. "Dad, you're all over social media," she said, and there was something in her voice he hadn't heard in years, excitement, pride. "My friends saw the videos, they can't believe it's you. It's just chess, sweetheart. It's not just chess. Dad, you were hiding, you've been hiding for so long. And now people are seeing you again." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I didn't mean to hide, I needed to rebuild, start over." "I know, but maybe you can stop starting over now. Maybe you can just be." After he hung up, Marcus sat at his chessboard. He thought about what he was doing. This wasn't really about chess. It wasn't about beating Victoria, though that had its own satisfaction. It was about reclaiming something, proving to himself that the last decade, the scandal, the fall, the rebuilding, hadn't erased who he fundamentally was. That his value as a person, as a thinker, as someone who could contribute something meaningful to the world, didn't disappear just because his circumstances changed. He'd been treated as invisible because of his uniform, his job, his position at the bottom of the social hierarchy. But he was still Marcus Webb, still the person who saw 20 moves ahead. Still the mind that could solve problems and find patterns and create beauty on 64 squares. Friday night came. The executive library on the 38th floor had been transformed. Someone, probably Victoria's assistant, had set up a proper tournament setting. A regulation chess board with weighted pieces, a digital chess clock, a demonstration board for the audience. Chairs arranged theater style. By 8 p.m., the room was packed. Over 50 people had shown up, employees from multiple companies in the building, chess enthusiasts who'd heard about the match. Even a local news crew, filming for a human interest segment. Wayne, the cleaning crew supervisor, pulled Marcus aside before the game started. "Listen, whatever happens tonight, you've got nothing to be ashamed of," Wayne said gruffly. "You've already shown everyone in this building that they were wrong about you. Win or lose, you've earned respect. Don't forget that." Marcus nodded, touched. "Thank you, Wayne, for everything. For giving me a chance when no one else would. You earned that chance by showing up every day and doing honest work. The chess is just, well, it's just showing folks there's more to you." But we already knew that. Victoria arrived at 8:15 sharp. She looked different tonight, more serious, less performative. She was dressed simply, black pants, white blouse, professional but not showy. And when she looked at Marcus, there was something new in her expression. Wariness. She'd studied the games, analyzed them. She'd probably shown them to chess-playing friends, maybe even to a coach. And she'd realized what everyone watching the previous matches had realized. Marcus wasn't just good, he was exceptional, possibly beyond her level. "Marcus," she said formally. "Shall we begin?" They drew lots for color. Marcus got white. The crowd settled into silence as Marcus made his first move, E4, the same opening as the first game. But this time Victoria didn't respond with E5. She played the Caro-Can defense, C6. Solid, defensive, strategic rather than tactical. She was playing not to lose rather than playing to win. Marcus smiled slightly. He understood the psychology. Victoria was scared, not of him personally, but of what another loss would mean to her reputation, her ego, her self-image as someone intellectually superior. But playing not to lose is how you lose. Marcus developed his pieces smoothly. He didn't go for cheap tricks or flashy attacks. He simply played good moves, sound moves, building his position brick by brick. By move 15, he had a slight advantage, nothing dramatic, just a bit more space. Slightly better piece coordination. The kind of advantage that might not matter between weaker players, but becomes decisive at the higher levels. Victoria was thinking longer and longer on each move. The chess clock showed she'd used 40 minutes of her 90-minute allocation. Marcus had used only 20. On move 23, Victoria made a decision. She couldn't keep playing defensively. She needed to create complications, shake up the position. So she sacrificed a pawn, trying to open up lines against Marcus's king. It was a good try, an aggressive, fighting move. The kind of move that showed Victoria's chess talent and courage. But it wasn't sound. Marcus didn't take the pawn immediately. Instead, he improved his pieces first. Then, 4 moves later, he took the pawn, and suddenly Victoria's position was simply worse. The complications she'd created worked against her. Her king was the one in danger. The crowd could feel it, the shift, the endgame approaching. Victoria was losing, not quickly but inevitably. She fought on for another 20 moves, trying to create threats, to find counterplay. to somehow impossibly salvage the game. But Marcus was relentless, perfect defense, perfect technique. He neutralized every threat, traded pieces at the right moments. Simplified into an endgame where his extra pawn became decisive. At move 58, with just rooks and pawns on the board, Victoria studied the position for 5 full minutes. The chess clock showed she had only 8 minutes remaining. Marcus had 43. Slowly, Victoria reached out and tipped over her king. "I resign," the crowd erupted. Applause, cheers. Not because they were happy Victoria lost, but because they'd witnessed something extraordinary. 3 games, 3 victories for the janitor who wasn't supposed to win once. But Victoria didn't stand immediately. She sat there staring at the board, and Marcus could see something crumbling in her expression. Not just defeat, but the dismantling of an assumption that had structured her entire identity. She'd believed she was special, exceptional, better than. The chess bet had been proof of that. Nobody could beat her. Nobody could challenge her intellectual throne. And now a man she'd looked past every day for 6 months, a man whose job was to empty her trash, had beaten her 3 times, decisively, brilliantly, with a skill that revealed he'd been operating at a level she'd never even reached. Victoria looked up at Marcus. "Who are you?" she asked, and this time it wasn't a demand, it was a genuine question. Confused, almost pleading, Marcus sat back. The room was silent, waiting. This was the moment when everything could change. He could walk away, keep his secret. Let Victoria and everyone else wonder. Maintain the mystery, or he could reveal the truth, not to gloat, not to humiliate, but to teach, to show what assumptions cost us. To illuminate the invisible people we walk past every day, never imagining what capabilities, what histories, what brilliance might be hidden behind circumstances. Marcus took a breath. "My name is Marcus Webb," he said quietly, and the entire room leaned forward to hear. "And 15 years ago, I was one of the top 100 chess players in the United States." The silence in the room was absolute, 50 people holding their breath, waiting. Victoria stared at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. "Top 100, she repeated slowly. "I earned my National Master title when I was 28, Marcus continued, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years of silence. "I played in 4 U.S. chess championships. Taught chess professionally for 20 years. I had 70 students at my peak, coached 3 of them to state championship titles. I played in simultaneous exhibitions, 20 boards at once, and usually won 18 or 19 of the games." Someone in the crowd was frantically typing on their phone, searching. "Oh my God," they said. "Marcus Webb, he's telling the truth. There's a Wikipedia article. He beat an international master in 2009. He was ranked 73rd in the country at one point." Victoria's face had gone pale. "Then why are you—" She couldn't finish the question. "Why are you cleaning offices? Why are you working as a janitor? Why didn't you say something?" Marcus looked at her steadily. 15 years ago, I was accused of something I didn't do. A parent at the chess club where I taught claimed I'd acted inappropriately with their child. It wasn't true. Investigation proved it wasn't true. The parent eventually admitted they'd made up the story because they were angry I'd removed their child from the advanced class for disciplinary reasons." He paused, and the pain of those years was evident in his voice. "But by the time the truth came out, 6 months had passed. Every one of my students had left. Parents don't take chances with accusations like that, guilty or innocent. My reputation was destroyed. My income disappeared. My wife left me, not because she believed I was guilty, but because she couldn't handle the stress and the gossip. I lost custody of my daughter, lost my house. Lost everything." The room was completely silent. Even the news camera operator had stopped moving. "I spent 3 years barely surviving," Marcus continued. "Took odd jobs. Moved from place to place. Eventually ended up in New York, starting over from nothing. Wayne gave me a job on the cleaning crew 2 years ago when nobody else would hire me. I'd been out of the workforce too long. No recent references. Just a gap in my resume that made people suspicious." Victoria was shaking her head slowly, and Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't tell you who I was because I wanted to see if you'd respect me without the credentials," Marcus said, and now there was something harder in his voice. Not cruel, but truthful. "You made that bet, beat me in chess and marry me, as a joke. Because you couldn't imagine that anyone, especially not someone like me. Someone in a janitor's uniform. Someone you saw every day but never really looked at. Could challenge you. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I didn't tell you this to make you apologize, Marcus said. I told you this because maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll look at the people around you, the people who serve you, who clean your office, who park your car, who make your coffee, and wonder what stories they carry, what talents they have, what circumstances brought them to where they are. He stood up from the chessboard. I don't want your charity donation. I don't want anything from you except maybe a small bit of awareness. Everyone you meet is carrying a world inside them. Everyone deserves to be seen. Marcus turned to leave, but Victoria stood quickly. Wait, please, he stopped. Victoria's face was a mess of emotions, shame, confusion, and something else, something awakening. You're right, she said, her voice shaking. I've been cruel without even meaning to be. I've been so focused on proving I'm the smartest person in the room that I never considered that the smartest person might not even be in the room, might be in the hallway, might be emptying my trash while I'm congratulating myself on my intelligence. She wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. I'm not going to insult you with immediate offers to change your life, or give you a job, or any of that savior complex nonsense. But I am going to tell you this. I've learned more from these 3 chess games than I learned from 4 years at Harvard Business School. And I'm going to spend a long time thinking about what that means. Marcus nodded. That's all I can ask. But Marcus, Victoria said, and now there was something else in her voice. A practical businesswoman's mind starting to work. You can't stay a janitor. Not because there's anything wrong with the work. Wayne and your colleagues are good people doing honest jobs. But because you have a gift, you have knowledge, you can teach, and keeping that hidden isn't humility, it's waste. Before Marcus could respond, Wayne stepped forward from the crowd. She's right, Marcus. I've known for 2 years that you were overqualified for this work. Didn't know your exact story, but I knew. And I gave you the job because you needed it and because you were a good man, but you don't need to hide anymore. Someone else in the crowd spoke up, one of the chess enthusiasts who'd come to watch. Mr. Webb, I run a chess academy in Brooklyn. We have 300 students. We're always looking for master-level teachers, if you're interested. Another voice. I'm a reporter with the Times. I'd love to interview you about your story, about returning to chess, about second chances. And another. My son needs a chess tutor. He's talented but needs proper instruction. I'll pay you 3 times what you're earning now. The offers cascaded. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, as people who 10 minutes ago hadn't known he existed suddenly wanted to be part of his life. It was dizzying, surreal, but also liberating. Victoria was watching him, and Marcus saw genuine respect in her eyes now, not because he'd beaten her at chess, though that had earned her attention, but because she understood, finally, what it cost to maintain dignity while invisible, what strength it took to rebuild from nothing. What grace he'd shown even when she'd treated him as a prop in her own story of superiority. Marcus, she said quietly, stepping closer so only he could hear. I'm going to do something. Not because I pity you or because I'm trying to assuage my guilt, but because it's right. Hartwell Industries has an executive development program. We bring in specialists to teach leadership, strategy, critical thinking. I want to hire you as a consultant. Teach our executives chess, not as a game, but as a framework for strategic thinking. Marcus started to protest, but Victoria held up her hand. Hear me out. We'll pay you $150 an hour. 2 sessions a week. You pick the time. You can keep your cleaning job if you want or not. But you'll have income, stability, and a platform to rebuild your reputation as an educator. Not because I beat you in some chess game, but because you're genuinely qualified. She paused. This isn't charity, it's restitution, for 6 months of walking past you without seeing you. For making a joke about your intelligence, for everything. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He could say no, could walk away and rebuild on his own terms, but that would be pride talking. And pride, he'd learned, was a luxury he couldn't always afford. Okay, Marcus said, but on one condition. Every person who comes to my chess lessons, executive or intern or janitor, starts as a beginner. No titles, no positions, just people learning to think. Everyone gets seen. Victoria smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. Deal. The crowd had been watching this exchange, and now someone started clapping, then another, then everyone. A standing ovation for Marcus Webb, not for beating the CEO, but for maintaining his dignity through years of invisibility, for being excellent when no one was watching, for teaching a lesson that no one knew they needed to learn. Marcus felt something break open inside him, something that had been closed tight for 15 years. He wasn't all the way back, wasn't fully restored, but for the first time in a decade, he could see a path forward that didn't involve hiding who he was. The news crew was filming everything. By tomorrow, this story would be everywhere. Marcus Webb, the janitor Grandmaster, the man who taught a CEO about humility. But standing there in that moment, Marcus wasn't thinking about the attention or the opportunities or even the vindication. He was thinking about his daughter. About calling her tonight and telling her that maybe, finally, she could be proud of him again. That the father she'd known, the teacher, the chess player, the man who could solve any problem if you gave him time to think, that man hadn't disappeared. He'd just been waiting, building patience, learning lessons of his own, and now he was visible again. The aftermath of that Friday night chess match was swift and transformative. By Saturday morning, the video had gone genuinely viral. 3 million views, then 10 million. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Hidden Grandmaster defeats tech CEO 3 times, read one headline. The janitor who humbled a Harvard graduate, read another. But the story that resonated most wasn't about humiliation. It was about the invisible people among us. About how circumstances don't reflect capability. About second chances and the cost of assumptions. Marcus's phone, which had barely rung in years, wouldn't stop. Chess academies wanted to hire him. Schools wanted him to speak. Chesscom wanted to feature him in a documentary. Sponsors wanted to back his return to competitive chess if he was interested. Within a week, Marcus had more opportunities than he could process. He hired an agent, a kind woman named Sarah who specialized in representing chess players, to help him sort through the offers. He accepted the position at Hartwell Industries, 2 sessions a week teaching strategic thinking through chess. His first class had 30 executives, including Victoria, who sat in the front row and took notes like a dedicated student. He also took the position at the Brooklyn Chess Academy. 3 days a week teaching kids who reminded him of his old students, of the life he'd lost. It was healing in ways he hadn't expected. The media attention was intense but mostly positive. Marcus was careful in interviews. He didn't attack Victoria, didn't play the victim, didn't milk the story for more than it was worth. Everyone deserves a second chance at seeing someone clearly, he said in his New York Times interview. Victoria Hartwell is a brilliant woman who made the same mistake many of us make. She equated someone's position with their potential. She learned from it. That's all we can ask. Victoria, for her part, handled the aftermath with grace. She gave her own interviews acknowledging her blind spots. She implemented changes at Hartwell Industries, including a program to provide educational opportunities and advancement paths for all employees, regardless of their current position. Marcus taught me that leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room, she said in one interview. It's about recognizing brilliance wherever it exists and creating space for it to flourish. The two developed an unlikely friendship. Not romantic, despite the viral videos joking about the marry me bet, but a genuine respect. They'd meet for coffee once a month to play chess and talk about life. Victoria was trying to become more aware, more humble. Marcus was trying to trust success again, to believe it wouldn't be taken away. 3 months after that Friday night game, Marcus competed in his first rated tournament in 15 years. He was rusty, certainly, but he won 4 games, drew 3, and lost only 1. His rating climbed back above 2,200, national master status still intact after all these years. His daughter came to visit. She watched him teach a class at the Brooklyn Academy, and afterward she hugged him tight. "You're back, Dad," she whispered. "You're really back." "I never left," Marcus said. "I just got quiet for a while." The other janitors at Hartwell Industries were happy for Marcus, but also a bit melancholy. He'd left the cleaning crew. He couldn't do both jobs, not with all the new opportunities. But he made sure to visit, to have dinner with Ramon and Sonia, to thank Wayne again and again for giving him a chance when he needed it most. "You didn't need thanking," Wayne said gruffly. You earned every bit of what's happening to you. Don't forget that. The viral nature of the story did bring some challenges. Marcus's old scandal resurfaced, journalists dug it up, asked questions. But this time, with his platform restored, Marcus could tell the full story. The false accusation, the exoneration, the destruction of his life despite his innocence. It sparked a broader conversation about how difficult it is to rebuild after false accusations, even after being proven innocent, about the court of public opinion, about second chances. Marcus became, somewhat reluctantly, a voice for others who'd lost everything to circumstances beyond their control. But mostly, Marcus just taught chess, to executives learning strategy, to kids discovering a game that could teach them to think, to seniors at community centers who wanted to keep their minds sharp. He built a new life, different from the old one, but meaningful. 6 months after the match, Hartwell Industries hosted a charity chess tournament. Victoria organized it, with all proceeds going to support educational programs for adults re-entering the workforce after setbacks. She called it the Second Chances Invitational. Marcus was the guest of honor. He played simultaneous exhibitions against 20 opponents, just like old times. He won 17 games, drew 2, and lost 1 to a 12-year-old prodigy who showed flashes of real brilliance. Victoria watched from the side, smiling. After the exhibition, she approached Marcus. You know, she said, I think about that night a lot, about how close I came to just never seeing you, to going my whole life convinced of my own superiority. You saw me eventually, Marcus said. Only because you made me, because you were brave enough to accept my challenge. She paused. I'm grateful. I hope you know that. I know. They stood together, watching the charity tournament continue around them. Two people from completely different worlds who'd learned from each other, who'd changed each other. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Marcus still had hard days, still woke up sometimes with the fear that it could all disappear again. Still carried the scars of those lost years. But he was visible, he was valued, he was teaching and learning and contributing, and that was enough. Here's what Marcus Webb's story teaches us, if we're willing to listen. We move through the world making constant judgments about people based on the smallest slices of information. Their job, their clothes, the way they speak, where they live, and we decide often unconsciously what they're capable of, what they're worth, whether they deserve our attention or respect. But every single person you encounter, every single one, is carrying a universe inside them. Stories you can't imagine, capabilities you'd never guess, struggles that would break you, triumphs that would inspire you. The person who cleans your office might be a chess master. Your Uber driver might have a PhD. The person serving your coffee might speak 5 languages. The security guard might be a published poet. Circumstances are not character. Position is not potential. What someone does for work is not who they are. Marcus Webb could have been bitter. Could have given up on chess entirely, seeing it only as a reminder of what he'd lost. Could have hidden forever, protecting himself from the vulnerability of being seen. Could have walked away when Victoria made her cruel joke, deciding it wasn't worth the risk. But he didn't. He chose dignity, chose to maintain his excellence even when no one was watching, chose to accept a challenge that could have humiliated him because he knew his own worth even if nobody else did. And Victoria Hartwell could have doubled down on her ego, could have made excuses, could have dismissed Marcus even after he beat her, finding reasons why it didn't count, could have made his life difficult out of embarrassment, but she didn't. She learned. She acknowledged her blind spots. She took action to change, not just her own behavior, but the systems that allowed people to remain invisible based on their position. That's the real lesson here. Not that assumptions are bad. We all make them. We can't analyze every person we meet with perfect attention. But that we need to hold our assumptions lightly. That we need to remain open to being surprised. That we need to actively look for the humanity in every person we encounter, regardless of the role they're playing in our lives at that moment. The mailman, the receptionist, the person who bags your groceries, the janitor. Every one of them is a full human being with dreams and fears and capabilities that might astound you if you bothered to ask. We live in a world that assigns value based on visible success, that respects credentials over character, that sees people's current circumstances as the sum total of who they are. Marcus Webb's story reminds us that this is a failure of imagination, a failure of compassion, and a failure that costs us all something precious, the chance to see brilliance wherever it exists, to learn from unexpected teachers, to be surprised by the depth of human potential. You might not meet a chess master disguised as a janitor, but you will meet extraordinary people disguised as ordinary ones. You already have probably dozens of times, you just didn't notice. The question is, will you start looking? Will you ask questions instead of making assumptions? Will you offer respect before it's earned with credentials? Will you consider that the person serving you might be your equal or even your superior in ways that aren't immediately visible? Because here's the truth that makes Marcus's story so powerful. There are thousands of Marcus Webbs out there right now. People working jobs that don't reflect their capabilities. People rebuilding from setbacks that weren't their fault. People carrying excellence quietly, with dignity, waiting for a chance to be seen. Some of them will get that chance like Marcus did. But most won't. Most will remain invisible, their gifts unrecognized, their potential unrealized. Unless we change, unless we start seeing. Unless we understand that treating people with respect and curiosity isn't just kindness, it's wisdom. Because you never know who you're talking to, you never know what someone is capable of. You never know whose dignity you're crushing with your casual dismissal. Marcus Webb taught Victoria Hartwell about humility through 3 chess games. But the real lesson took 50 years of his life to learn and 6 months to teach. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves respect. Not because of what they've accomplished or what they can prove, but because they're human, because we're all carrying worlds inside us. Because the measure of a person isn't their title or their salary or their current circumstances. It's how they treat others, how they maintain dignity under pressure, how they choose kindness when they could choose bitterness, how they keep their excellence sharp even when no one's watching. By that measure, Marcus Webb was always a master. The chess title was just confirmation of something that was true all along. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the people you encounter every day, if it reminded you that dignity and potential exist in unexpected places, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to hear more stories like this. Because these are the stories that matter. The ones about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about second chances, about justice and dignity and the human capacity to surprise us. But Marcus Webb's story of redemption and respect, that's just the beginning. Because what happened when a homeless veteran walked into a luxury car dealership with a crumpled lottery ticket and a dream? Well, that's a story that'll make this one look tame. A story about assumptions, compassion, and a young salesman who made a choice that changed 2 lives forever. But that's a story for next time. Until then, remember, look closer, ask more. Assume less, because the most remarkable person you meet today might be someone you'd otherwise walk right past.